The Death Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time. Chapter 90. Let's go, you sorry bastards. It wasn't snowing yet, but cold enough for the breath of the men in the unit led by the knight Karkan to turn white as they took the side road south. There were about 50 of them, and although they belonged to the knight's order, only 3 of the men other than Karkan, including the vice-captain, had formally been decorated as knights. The unit was made up of those with the social position of equestrian, future knight candidates, and the apprentices of knights. They were less skilled than knights, but equal to or slightly above the average soldier. They were wearing old leather armor with numerous patches and stitches rather than suits of armor and helmets bearing the crest of the Hartner Duchy. At a glance, they appeared to be an orderly mercenary band. "This is certainly not a pleasant mission, but this is for the sake of Lord Lucas, for the sake of the Hartner Duchy's future, and for the sake of our people. Don't make those faces. You look like the remnants of a defeated army," said Karkan. "But is this really necessary? Isn't Lord Lucas's succession to the family almost certain at this point?" asked a man, voicing his opinion. He was Froto, the spy who was participating in this mission as a staff officer, the man whom Vandaloo believed to be a virtuous priest of Alda. Lord Lucas was the eldest son, but his mother was a concubine, so people had thought that it would be difficult for him to succeed the family. But, as Frodo said, Lord Lucas's succession to the family was now more or less decided. The great scandal caused by Keenarp, the former guildmaster of the Mages Guild, and his subordinates, who revealed that numerous noblemen had connections with vampires who worshipped an evil god. Lord Belton, the second son born to the Duke's legal wife, had been almost certain to succeed the family, but he had been caught up in the big waves caused by this scandal. He had managed to protect himself, but the fact that his subordinates had been working with the vampires had been revealed, so he had withdrawn from the dispute to succeed the family. Becoming a duke in the Orbaum Kingdom meant gaining the rights to be a candidate to become the king. Those of the other duchies and the current king himself had expressed their opinions one after another that they could not entrust this position to someone whose followers had been traitors to humanity. Meanwhile, Lord Lucas had given a performance where he had conducted a strict investigation to find out if any of his supporters had connections to vampires, and personally hunted and sentenced them. Lord Belton was trying to appeal his innocence by doing such as hiring the 5-colored blades, but people already doubted him. People wondered whether he was simply a lizard sacrificing its own tail to survive. Now that he had lost the people's confidence and his prominent supporters, every church, including the Church of Alda, had distanced themselves from him, and nobody sympathized with him. Lord Belton had lost his standing. Of course, the worst-case scenario was that he would be taken somewhere to rest, to recover from a sudden illness, or be made to live a religious life in a remote church somewhere, so the result of losing his standing wasn't particularly unsatisfactory. Once Lord Lucas succeeded the Duke, Lord Belton would live on as the head of the family branch. And it seemed that the current Duke Hartner wouldn't last until spring. With the circumstances as they were now, Lord Lucas's succession to the family was all but confirmed. Frodo could not be blamed for doubting whether there was any meaning in crushing Lord Belton's cultivation project now. But Karkan whispered into Frodo's ear, "You may say that, Frodo, but if you do nothing now, you will return to your previous meaningless position." Frodo's face stiffened. He had been content with his meaningless position in the Mages Guild, but the reason he had been disguising himself as a priest and gone around to the cultivation villages gathering information was all for the sake of becoming one of the Duke's personal mages. He had gone through a lot of trouble in order to become more renowned. That trouble would all go to waste at this rate. Either you perform one more job and acquire the reward you wanted, or receive thanks for your cooperation up until now and a little money before returning to your original position. It is one or the other, said Karkan. I understand, said Frodo. Being pressed like this, he was unable to refuse. The truth was that the actions of Karkan and his unit would not be of any benefit to Lord Lucas. In fact, it would cause slight harm. But Karkan's seniors had been busy dealing with a recent series of events. They hadn't given him any orders to cancel the plan to destroy the cultivation project. Stand by for now. That was the order that Karkan had been given. Lord Lucas himself and the high-ranking members of the Knights' Order supporting him had made it clear that now was not the time to make careless moves. But Karkan had read too much into this, assuming that he had essentially been told, "We have no expectations of you lot anymore, so don't make a move." He feared that he would be discarded for not having been any use in Lord Lucas's victory in the dispute to succeed the Duke. Now he was trying to execute his originally devised plan of having his unit pretend to go on an expedition, enter a side road far from the city, disguise themselves as bandits, and destroy the cultivation villages. If one just thought calmly for a moment, they would give up on such a plan, but as Karkan had been assigned to do all the dirty work, his sense of suspicion was greater than most people. His perspective had grown narrow. If he didn't make a move, would the consequences he had threatened Frodo with not also happen to him? That was how paranoid his thoughts were. But Karkan showed not the slightest sign of having been driven to such a mentality as he looked around the unit he was in charge of. He had managed to convince Frodo he was carrying on silently alongside the fake traveling merchant who had been a spy right from the beginning. But the morale of the other men did not look high. Things won't go well at this rate, he thought. The cultivation villages had no significant ability to defend themselves in battle. The largest village was the 7th cultivation village, with a population of 250. None of them were soldiers in occupation. There were 3 former refugees who were adventurers, but according to the information available, they were E-class adventurers whose D-class promotion had only just become a realistic dream for them. In terms of ability, they were probably no different from the equestrians of Karkan's unit. With 50 armed men, it wouldn't be difficult to slaughter the entire village. They would need to be careful of the adventurers, but there would be no problems if they did. The only concern was the Dhampir boy. He had fled the city for some reason, so his whereabouts were currently unknown. But even if, by some tiny chance, he was in the cultivation villages right now, he was only about as strong as a D-class adventurer, other than his healing magic, or so they thought. If the true knights, with Frodo's enhancements, including Karkan, surrounded the villages, they would be able to dispose of the people in the villages one-sidedly. But the low morale was not good. If they were careless, unexpected failures might occur. Villagers might survive after seeing their faces, or even kill one of Karkan's men when they let their guard down. Karkan wanted to avoid that. Deciding that it could not be helped, he spoke to his men to get them into the mood for their work. "Gentlemen, I know this mission is an unpleasant task," he said. "Even if we succeed, officially speaking, we'll have done nothing more than conducted an expedition, so we will not be praised for our work. However, due to the nature of the mission, it is necessary for us to disguise ourselves as bandits. And what is it that bandits do when they attack helpless villages?" At first, the equestrians gave Karkan a puzzled look before suddenly being taken aback at what he meant. What bandits did in villages was pillaging, violence, rape, and kidnapping. "Commanding officer, is that really all right?" Equestrians lived their everyday lives under strict discipline. As they were those who would soon succeed their true knight parents, they had to motivate themselves to learn the art of combat and study academic subjects on a regular basis. They had to become an example for the soldiers. In the future, they would command soldiers and defend their nation with their swords. Because of the position they were in, they could not openly enjoy gourmet foods and drinks or make love to the women of the red light districts. Especially since the Sauron Duchy had fallen to the Amid Empire, there was a lingering atmosphere that they needed to be ready for combat at all times, so they couldn't loosen their restraints by even the smallest amount. These were the equestrians that Karkan was speaking to. "Of course," he said, "but we will not be kidnapping anyone. Once you have enjoyed them like bandits, dispose of them like bandits. Don't loosen your restraints too much just because there's no risk of making any children. Those who injure their backs and can't ride their horses will be dragged by force." The equestrians were suddenly excited. Some of them were more in anticipation of the extra money they would earn rather than the women, but given the strange circumstances of being told that they could rape women as much as they wanted, most of them were unable to hide their excitement. Frodo turned pale as he imagined what the men would do in the cultivation village. His original role had been that of an informant. He had never imagined that he would have to directly witness the villagers suffering and being killed. He would suffer a greater impact by seeing the corpses with his own eyes and watching the villagers suffering as they die. But now that he had come this far, he couldn't say that he would quit, nor could he escape. If you're going to resent anyone, resent the Amid Empire who took your homeland from you. I have done nothing wrong. All I wanted to gain was a social position benefiting someone like me, thought the fake priest, shifting the responsibility away from himself. Having gone around the villages and seeing that their preparations for the winter had gone well, Vandaloo performed his usual healings and secretly stationed golems at each village before returning to the 7th cultivation village. He caught rank 2 blood-sucking rats on the way there. He had the owner of the Jack-of-all-trades store cook their meat, which was richer than it appeared, and shared it with everyone. And then he stayed the night in the same room as Cassim and his friends. Things are going well for now, he thought. Now that the slave-run mine was gone, traveling merchants no longer came to the cultivation villages, but it seemed that there would be no problems lasting until spring. Once it became warmer, Cassim and his party would have to escort the young men to buy things at the city, however. While they were there, they planned to consult the Commerce Guild and see if they could arrange other traveling merchants to visit the cultivation villages. Despite not being citizens of Talosheim, these people were people who adored Vandaloo. Despite it having been for the sake of rescuing the Titan slaves, he felt a little guilty that he had caused such an inconvenience to the village. If the fangs of the Dark Knight were still functioning, I would have been able to take measures against that, but I wonder if these people would come to my nation. If they did that, Vandaloo would not have to hold back when it came to various things. He would be able to give them houses, furniture, and food, and offer them work, just like he had done with the people from the 1st cultivation village. He would be able to have them eat delicious dinosaur meat, fully seasoned with all kinds of flavor, instead of preserved gabu-gabu. There wouldn't be any need to station dozens of Lemure lookouts, stone golems, and death iron golems at every village. No matter what the Hartner family did, they would be able to live in safety inside Talosheim, which was currently having its 6th outer wall built. It did occur to Vandaloo that he should just tell the villagers everything, but that would be equivalent to pressing the people of the cultivation villages to separate themselves from human society. Vandaloo was not confident that this would lead to their happiness. If the Hartner Duchy was a little more trustworthy, if the innermost members of its government and guilds didn't have connections to the purebreed vampires, then he would have more options, however. In the end, the purebreed vampires and Heinz's party are in my way. I have to erase them somehow, or at least reduce their numbers. If Vandaloo took direct measures, the purebreed vampires would interfere. If he took indirect measures, Heinz's party would interfere. The purebreed vampires and Heinz's party were supposed to be enemies to each other, but they were hindering Vandaloo as if they had joined forces. I could get rid of one member under the right circumstances, if things go well from there. But I suppose it's dangerous to presume that there's a chance of things going well. I don't know how much they were cornered by the information I made Keenarp reveal. If the timing doesn't match up, the spirits of Chapiris and the other vampires were horribly damaged, so I can't get any good information out of them. with Isla's information alone. Heinz's party had done things in a flashy way. Thanks to that, the Lemures stationed in the sky over the city had been enough to let Vandaloo know that battles had been occurring, and he had been able to find the spirits of the dead to communicate with them. But couldn't anything be done about the heavy damage to spirits? Vandaloo had turned the Hound Isla, one of Turnesia's 5 dogs that were her trusted retainers, into an undead straight away, so there was almost no damage to her memory. But the spirit of the fine dog, Chapiris, who had been split in two by Heinz, was damaged all over. The only other spirits Vandaloo could obtain were those of the Mad Dog and Fighting Dog. The 5th was Foolish Dog, apparently not moving from its hiding place. Vandaloo just hoped that he could get information from the Mad Dog and the Fighting Dog. As these thoughts ran through his mind, he looked at the room's ceiling, which he could see clear as day thanks to his dark vision skill. He could not sleep. For some reason, Pete and the other insects that Vandaloo had equipped inside his body with the insect binding technique skill were moving around inside him late at night, disturbing his quiet sleep with the sensation of them squirming beneath his skin. It tickled, so he was inadvertently letting out stifled laughter. The status effect resistance skill kept sleep deprivation at bay, so Vandaloo was completely awake now. There's no helping it, he thought, deciding to get up. Sunrise was close. Vandaloo decided to pass the time by doing some morning training. He silently crawled out of the bunk bed, spread a handkerchief-sized piece of tanned leather on the floor, so as not to wake Cassim and his friends, who were still sleeping, and then began to do push-ups with his tongue. It was harsh training that required not his arms, but his tongue extended with the body extension tongue skill, to support his entire body weight. The tongue was a muscle, so it would surely be very effective training. It would be quite the problem if he were to be seen by Cassim and his friends, but the 3 of them were humans and they couldn't really see in the dark, so there wouldn't be any problems if he just stopped right after they woke up. But Vandaloo did only a few of these push-ups before stopping. The Lemures stationed around the village had detected several shadows of what appeared to be bandits. Who are these guys? Through the Lemures, he could see a group of several dozen armed men, wearing leather and cloths over their faces. Seeing this, Vandaloo would assume they were just bandits, but for some reason many of them were riding horses. 1 or 2 bandits might have seemed normal, but there were around 20 mounted men. They were all sturdy horses. The one at the front carrying the man holding a kite shield was particularly sturdy-looking, so muscular that Vandaloo would feel the urge to touch it. Normal bandits might have carriages to carry the items they pillaged, but they would not have a cavalry. Horses cost money to feed, as they simply didn't eat anything they were given, and they were normally cowardly creatures. And the bandits themselves were farmers or residents of slums who had gone broke, so they didn't have the technique for fighting on horseback. That was why having war horses would just be a waste of money to feed. Selling those horses would actually yield more profit than attacking a small village with one. In fact, Vandaloo had never encountered a single mounted bandit among all of the bandit groups he had attacked and robbed. Then maybe these bandits are mercenaries who have gone broke? There were people in Lambda who would normally do mercenary work, then act as bandits to make a living when there was no work available. And because such people sold their strength to the battlefield to earn their money, they were far stronger than normal bandits. At the very least, they were stronger than ordinary soldiers, possessed skills, and used martial skills. Though it was late, Vandaloo now felt a reaction from danger-sensed death. At this rate, it was possible that the village would be annihilated. No, its annihilation was certain. "This is bad," he muttered to himself. As enemies, they were not a threat to Vandaloo. If the bandit group were aiming only for Vandaloo, he would be able to overwhelm them, just like he had done with the Goblin King and the pack of 1,000 goblins. The difficult thing was to defeat them without losing any of the villagers as casualties. If he held back as he had been doing up until now, he would definitely lack the manpower to accomplish this. There was no helping it. Vandaloo decided to get a little serious. He quickly cast energy absorption and bloodshed enhancement on the equipment of Kasim's party that was in the room. He then used his scream skill to let out a loud voice, waking up Kasim's party. "It's a bandit attack!" An attack? On this village? Even though they were novices, they were adventurers. Despite being surprised, they got out of bed quickly. Vandaloo quickly explained the situation to them. "Several dozen strong bandits are closing in on the village," he said. "What? Really?" "Yes, my insects have told me." Vandaloo had noticed the bandits so quickly because he had been unable to sleep due to Pete and the other insects who had been making so much noise, so this wasn't exactly a lie. Hearing this, the 3 young adventurers hastily began equipping their weapons and armor. "If it was Fester saying it, we would have doubted him," said Kasim. "We trust you because it's you, Vandaloo," said Zeno. "Unlike me, you don't say things while half asleep," Fester added. It seemed that he had a history of speaking nonsense while half asleep. "But will we be able to handle the strong bandits?" asked Zeno. "Don't complain. There are dozens of them. Even if we're not enough, we have no choice but to do this," said Kasim. There was audible tension in their voices. "I think you'd manage if you were fighting them one-on-one," Vandaloo told them. "I've applied enchantments, too." In fact, yesterday Kasim's party had told him that they would soon be allowed to take the D-class promotion exam, so they were already stronger than average soldiers. As long as they could kill people and had their minds stay normal after killing them, there was no way they would lose in a one-on-one battle. But surprisingly, it wasn't Kasim or Zeno, but Fester who called out to Vandaloo with a serious look on his face. "Hey, Vandaloo, do you have any tips for fighting people?" They seemed to have sensed that Vandaloo was experienced in fighting other people, while they repeated their training and practice battles with him. Since the only human-shaped creatures they had killed so far were goblins and kobolds, they were asking him for advice. "Tips," Vandaloo repeated. He was hard-pressed to answer this question. He had killed multiple people with his own hands, drank their blood, and used their corpses as undead, but he didn't remember thinking anything in particular about doing so. For him, killing people was no different than preparing fish after catching them. Meanwhile, the bandits had made their preparations for the attacks. They had split into 3 groups. The archers and infantry would go around to surround the village, and once they were in position, half of the cavalry would attack the front gate, facing the highway, while the other half would attack the smaller rear gate. The cavalry would cause chaos, while the archers and infantry would bring down the fleeing villagers. "Golems, activate. Exterminate the enemies as they approach. Princess Levia and the other ghosts, stay transparent and stand by in the sky." What advice should I give Fester? Vandaloo's head was working hard, using the parallel thought processing skill, to give orders to the Lemures and golems, as well as telling Levia and the other ghosts to stand by. The response he gave in the end was a cliched one. "Imagine what will happen if you don't fight, or what will happen when you're defeated," he told Fester. "Imagine?" "Yes. What will the bandit group do to this village? What will they do with Lena-san if we are defeated?" Lena was the poster girl of the Jack-of-all-trades store, the sole employee of the Adventurers Guild branch in the village. What the bandit group would do upon finding a young woman like her did not need explaining. Fester, who had feelings for her, gripped his sword tightly. "All right. I'm not sure that I can kill anyone, but I'll leave the feelings of fear and vomiting for afterwards," he said. Vandaloo had used a line that he had seen a heroine in a manga on Earth say to encourage the protagonist, who disliked fighting, but it seemed to have been more effective than he had expected. "I was contemplating between this and telling him to imagine that his enemies are pumpkins or something, but I suppose this was the right choice." "Don't worry, I'm the shield-bearer. I'll protect you properly," said Kasim. "I'll watch your back, but I'm not going to pat it," said Zeno. "Ask Lena to do that for you afterwards." "No, I didn't mean that I'd actually vomit." "Shit. Vandaloo, where should we go?" Fester asked. "Do we go to the front gate?" "I'll leave the back gate to you," said Vandaloo. "Around 10 mounted men will come that way. please, hold out until I arrive. Tell the villagers not to leave their houses. I'll handle things at the front gate."
"All right."
Normally, they would stop a boy half their age, saying that he would handle things on his own, but Kasim's party knew that Vandaloo was so strong they couldn't defeat him even if all three of them attacked him at once. They watched him open the wooden door and fly out without stopping him before heading for the back gate.
"Attack! Attack! Bandit attack! Close your doors and stay in your houses!"
Vandaloo was using the scream skill to warn the villagers, who would slowly be waking up around this time.
"It's so noisy. Could it be that they've noticed us?" asked one of Karkan's subordinates, seemingly afraid. "Even if they have, the plan does not change," Karkan shouted, drawing his sword. He had a bad feeling about the high-pitched voice that he could hear coming from the village, but he ignored it and commenced the plan. "Don't hold back! Pillage and kill! This is for the sake of justice! Let's go, you sorry bastards!" he roared.
Seeing their commander charge forward, the equestrians, disguised as bandits, let out violent war cries as they followed.
"They really came? You stupid fool, stay calm!"
The men who had been keeping watch at the front gate during the night trembled with pale faces at the fearsome war cries and hoofbeats drawing closer. It seemed that the bandits were far more terrifying than goblins or wild beasts.
"Doctor, we'll leave the rest to you."
"Let's see here," said Vandaloo, whom many had started to call Doctor because he had been conducting medical treatments every time he visited the village. He prepared his method for killing all of the bandits. These men were probably mercenaries acting as bandits, but they were nothing but small fry for Vandaloo with his current power. He would simply need to fire death bullets as they approached and swing his claws a few times. That would be the end of it. But they were riding horses. The horses should provide quite a bit of income for this village. He wanted to leave the horses alive. If the wind had been blowing the other way, he could have just released volatile, paralyzing venom into the air, but unfortunately the village was downwind.
"Now then, I'm counting on you," he said.
8 spears of black flames appeared.
"Ah, is this magic?"
one of the villagers cried.
"Yes, this is fire attribute magic,"
said Vandaloo, lying without hesitation, as he released a dead spirit magic skill.
"I'll destroy the gate with my martial skill. Follow me."
A spear of black fire pierced the chest of the man at the front who was raising his sword. A second and third spear followed, incinerating the internal organs of the man, of Karkan. Karkan opened his eyes wide in astonishment as he stared at the small, white-haired boy floating above the wooden gate.
"Impossible. He wasn't just a user of healing magic and the unarmed fighting technique."
With the astonishment still etched on his face, he tumbled off of his horse.
Captain! Karkan Dono!"
Seeing Karkan's subordinates and Frodo stop their horses, their formations falling apart, Vandaloo saw a chance and released more spears of black flames and threw kunais at them.
"Ah! Stonewall!
Oh, it's poison! There's poison on the..."
One after another, Karkan's subordinates had their chests pierced and their organs burned from the inside, or fell to the poison on the kunais made by Jatara and Taria, which had also been turned into cursed weapons. There were some who immediately raised their shields and used their martial skills, but martial skills like Stonewall with level 1 shield technique were meaningless against Vandaloo's dead spirit magic and throwing skills. The kunai that had been turned into cursed weapons, made of dragon bones and death iron, thrown with his level 4 superhuman strength, were about as powerful as cannonballs, and since they were coated with poison, even a graze would spell the end for these men. Frodo, who had been at the back, let out a scream of terror as he tried to flee. Vandaloo raised a kunai to throw into his back, but upon hearing the words of the spirits of Karkan and his men, who had approached him due to the death attribute charm affecting them because they had died, he stopped.
"Pete, everyone, please, capture him alive,"
Several dozen insectoid monsters, including Pete, flew out of Vandalu's body and chased after Frodo. He had his remaining insects inject paralyzing venom into the horses and use death attribute magic to turn the bandits who were still breathing into ashes.
"You didn't have to go that far," one of the villagers murmured.
"They were still breathing, so I had to do it just in case," said Vandalu, lying to them again.
He had now lied to them so many times that he had lost count, but he had no choice. These bandits, Karkan and his men, were knights of this nation. Vandalu hadn't heard the fine details of why they had attacked this cultivation village yet, but
"Things have turned out badly. Now that it's come to this, I have to kill the knights so they can't be recognized," he thought as he turned around.
"By the way, what are those insect-looking things?"
"They are my pleasant companions," said Vandalu. "You don't have to worry about them. Now then, I'm going to take a look at the back gate."
Hearing the villagers' shouts of, "All right, and we're leaving it to you," behind him, Vandalu headed for the back gate where Cassim and his friends were fighting.
"Doctor was a tamer, huh?"
"Yeah, he's amazing. But should we say something to him about bringing them into the village without mentioning them?"
"Maybe we should. He did cure my athlete's foot only yesterday, though."
"Now that you mention it, he did something about my toothache as well. I suppose we'll just give him a slight warning."
"Yeah."
The gate guards, who were now tying up the horses so that they would not run away, didn't know that the insectoid monsters had been deemed untamable by the Tamers Guild. This was the level of knowledge of people who had never actually seen a tamer.